Hello and welcome to the BuddySpoiler podcast. I'm alone today. Basically, there's been a lot of schedule conflicts and all that, so I've taken on myself to release a podcast episode by myself this time, so we don't miss a week. Anyways, my name is Bren, otherwise known as the Night Shadow, and I will be your only caster this time around. But we do have a lot to cover, so let's just get into it. First things first, let's have some news around Buddy Fight. We've had a couple of Spring Fests since the last time we were here. We've had the Chicago one on March 3 to 4, the Jakarta one in Indonesia around the same time, and the Atlanta, Georgia one the following week. And each of these has had some interesting, shall we say, patterns. For starters, the first place team has always had an Auto Deity Army deck and has had a Thunder Emperor's Fangs, though their third has kind of ranged a little bit. In Chicago, Antonio Wilson piloted Star Dragon World, specifically Athera. And in both Jakarta and Atlanta, Andrew Conan and Van Medina brought Levitain. Those are interesting decks to bring along, I think, but they definitely do showcase one thing. Both Chaos and Thunder Emperor's Fangs are definitely here around to stay for at least a short little bit. Since next week's weekend is Toronto's and Singapore's Springfests, then we'll probably see if that trend continues. It probably will. It's good to see more variety in the third slot, though, so we'll see what happens on that end. Also, in, shall we say, related news, because it's not necessarily about Buddy Fight, but Vanguard got a reboot. And this is one I definitely want to talk about in more detail when we have more people around, so I'll leave that at that. Just want to bring up that Vanguard's rebooting back to their very first season and reintroducing some new mechanics along with some, I should rephrase that, introducing some new mechanics while going back to the old style of cards. And there's been some comments about whether Buddy Fight will take that route. Personally, I don't think so, but we're going to have to wait and see as to what the future holds. Anyways, the main topic for this week is actually New World Chaos. It's releasing next week, at least at the time of this recording, and probably the weekend that this is released. So I definitely want to get into it and talk about some cards. Definitely some cards that are key to watch out for depending on what decks you play. New World Chaos is the English booster releasing on March 23, 2018. It is a combination of Complete Chaos from the Japanese set, UBO3, as well as 5 World Buildmasters, a sort of like 5 focused worlds with a bunch of generic cards that helped make a deck that was made easy for beginners to get into. The combined set for English makes collecting rarities normally a lot more difficult. If it weren't for the fact that something I do like about this set, the rarities in the set, everything is possible to get a triple R and below, with some of them being reprinted at Secret Rare. It helps immensely. And what I do like about this is that they've realized that the Western fan base really, really, really likes a lot of high-end rarity, a bit more so than the Japanese. And so printing a bunch of cards at Secret Rare that were not there previously helps the collectors get what they want, while the players who just need the cards to play can just get the lower rarities at no big cost. And that also helps because the main key card that Chaos is getting, which is their new flag, is only at a rare. And I do find that really, really nice, even though it also has an infinite rare version and an SP. But hey, having a card available multiple times in a set is not bad. Well, moving on, let's start talking about worlds. Why don't we go in chronological order? Starting with Dragon World. There isn't a lot in Dragon World that kind of interests me, but that might be due to my inexperience with the world, which I know is saying a bunch since I've been there since the very beginning, but I do want to take a look at 2 cards, however. The first being Omnilord Elder Tenbu. Since this is an Omnilord, it can fit into pretty much any deck, and what I do like about it is that it gives a nullify ability to a monster, and it's something that not a lot of decks have access to, and so having that one copy can definitely help. And the other card I wanted to look at is Corrosion Code 315 Machining Chaos Dragon. When the text says, you may only call insert card name once per turn, that probably means it's a really good card. But there's not a lot of corrosion cards or the chaos upgrade that you can grab from this. You do get a look at the top 5 and add 2. But my main issue is that building around the corrosion codes might not necessarily be an archetype because Auto Deity is such a strong engine. And going back to original Chaos just has a lot more removal and defensive tools. So I'm wary about corrosion code, but with that text, it makes me feel like I need to try it to see what's going to happen. And I implore you to do the same, because it might work for you. Alright, on to Danger World. There's kind of 2 or 3 cards I want to talk about, depending on how well they're tied in. The first one is Weapon of Destruction Dragoon. This card is really interesting to me because it was the winner of an elementary school contest that Bushiroad put out. They sent a whole bunch of these forms with create your own card, and the winner ended up being made into a card, which is why dual golems have another overkill on not Dragolem. But this is a really interesting one nonetheless, and when you look at the original card, it's kind of interesting to see how little it's changed. In fact, this one has 1,000 more power in exchange for 2,000 less defense. They obviously toned down what Chaos Power and the Overkill does, but overall it was really nicely balanced for an elementary school kid, and I do like that. It also gives, obviously, the dual golem decks another Overkill that they can possibly use. And I dare say this is possibly usable in Chaos as well, only for the cannot be nullified of attacking alone. If you're running into a format or a meta that you have a ton of nullifies, then there's not that many around, now that I think about it. But in case that your meta is one of the few that is, then this is definitely going to be a good sideboard tech for your Chaos and Dual Golems deck. Moving on, I want to talk about Performance Test. So, the biggest problem with Dragolem's Overkill from the first one is that it gave everybody really powerful striking power, but it had nothing for removal. And being able to answer cards by destroying them or bouncing them really, it sucked. Well, thanks to Performance Test, we can at least save a dual golem without having to lose your attacking force. And combined with the new Dragolem, which is an anti-rest card, you really get the sense that it's trying to sustain that pressure up for just long enough that you can take out the win with your high critical attacks. And really, that's a good flavor size for Danger World and what Dragolem is trying to do in dual golems. So hopefully this is just enough to put it over the edge to we can see it as a rogue deck. It's not quite there in my opinion, but it's almost there. There's just 1 or 2 more missing pieces before we get there. But it's really close. Next up is Magic World, my home world. And it looks like they gave us a lot of goodies to make up for the fact that, well, we didn't really get that much support in the first 3 quarters of the decks. Well, let's start with Plague first, and the first card I want to look at is Enigma Virus. Yes, this can only be used if you have a Plague item, but, well, Shadow Shades don't really need their item right now, and obviously this is usable in Plague. And being able to block monster calls by card effects is a really strong ability. This covers everything from calling from drop zone to calling via ability to, heck, using overkill on Gear God. There's a lot of just these weird card effect calls that you get to stop, and that combined with Be Gone basically locks your opponent out of playing anything but size 3s from their hand, which can be very useful. I mean, it also has nice secondary effects. Well, oh no, it can't be put into drop zone by effects. But definitely the main draw to this card is the fact that you can block calling monsters from card effects. And I don't think that ability is effectively done in any other world. There are parts of it that are done, like Invitation to Deathground, but there isn't really one like this, and it's a really powerful ability that is nice and niche in a way, because it's possible to just face a deck that doesn't even have that, like dual golems, and you have nothing to use for that except for just its damage effect. The second card I do want to look at, though, is Contagious Weakening Gel. Contagious Weakening Gel? How do I read that? It's Contagious... Okay, whatever. I'm keeping this in. Contagious Weakening Gas. This is an interesting card to use against Thunder Emperor. And or Thunder Empire rather. And the remaining reason to say that is because casting this against opponents' overthrow bots, and then casting a second copy, makes it so that they really won't have enough gauge to cast their 20 damage impact unless they attack 12 times. But the hope there is that you want to get them dealt enough damage that this is your secondary win con as sort of side, and in the soul, I mean, -1k, -1k. We've seen how well that works in Lapis Lazuli Greaves. It can work if your defense is high enough, and Zayabol is just the right target for it. So overall, this is a nice spell that I think can see use in other decks as long as you just put a random plague spell onto the board, and, well, plague card onto the board. And the reason I mentioned spell is because there's a lot of decks that are teching 1 or 2 copies of Great Spell Circle of Reservoir, and that's a play that you can use for this. Moving on, let's go to the 5 World Build Master cards, and thank you for giving us Sephiroth's Lecture. This is a really easy to cast Bots X Link that is a little bit weaker, but you can effectively spam it on both players' turns because it's only casting a spell. So if you shield, you now get to use this and replace it with a card in the top 2 cards of your deck. It's an easy gauge outlet, it's a nice spell, it's also a card that you can just use up immediately so that you can Solomon's Wall or Fake Out it. And speaking of which, Solomon's Wall and Fake Out are here. We finally have shield spells that are finally worth Magic World's time. Our best shield spell from the very beginning was Magical Goodbye. Not Solomon's Shield, Magical Goodbye. And the theme of bouncing for Magic World has kind of been there since BTO1 and stuck with us. We've had some shields along the way. Solomon's Shield, it's all cool. That's how I roll. Nothing's really stuck out. Chillax has probably been the only one that has, but the pay 1 gauge has detrimented a couple of decks along the way. Well, now that we have Solomon's Wall and Fake Out, I think we're good for shields. Being able to reuse our shields is really nice, even if it does take us a while to get there, because when you get to stack the deck the way you want to, or just prevent yourself from deck out, it's just a nice secondary effect to this already strong shield. And, hey, I'm glad that we don't have restrictions on our shields anymore. Yes, having a spell in our drop zone is not a restriction. Even if we get Mysteria Overturn, it's pretty simple to get through. I was thinking of covering Ursinius, but I think he's pretty self-explanatory, and everything else is more or less just there for nice and being nice. Nothing really much to talk about other than that, but that is still a good spot of significant cards. Now we get to Katana World, and oh boy, we got a bunch of stuff here. I normally don't talk about reprints here, but I do want to pay special attention to Demon Way Akishigure. Akishigure was a card that definitely was needed to be reprinted. I can tell you how many people have been looking for this card, all in North America. There's a lot. And, hey, we got it back. Anyways, let's move on to Oni Assassins first, and first card I want to talk about is Kiribuki Genamaru, the Witching Hour Oni. The minus stats is kind of an interesting ambush. It's not going to be your main source of protection, but if you're able to gamble that your opponent doesn't have the 20 damage impact in Thunder Empire, or if they're super reliant on keeping one monster alive, you can weaken it significantly with this. Yes, the power doesn't matter to the overthrow bots, but the minus critical does. And not only that, but you can give this to the opponent's weapon as well. So when the Dragonification bots item comes out next set, you're not too worried about them having access to 12 attacks, because you can minus critical to both of them, thanks to the previous Kiribuki Arabon being able to select whatever card you want from your deck and put into its soul. Speaking of which, its overkill is definitely an alternative. I do like this overkill quite a bit, and it's a nice tool that isn't necessary, but is a good access tool. It lets you search your deck for 3 cards and put it in face down. It's a nice way to kickstart or continue on your ambush chain. And hey, I mean, getting the cards for the situation is nice, and when it's about to be destroyed, you can do it in response or protect it. Your opponent doesn't really know what's going to happen when Disc Overkill is still live. And I like it for that. The next one I want to talk about is White Mask Tyrant Kiribuki, and this has the Zyogre ability, revealing it from hand and putting into a monster, or rather card face down. And being able to bounce a card on play, even without ambush, is just really, really nice. Especially when the main decks are going to be moving only Horde to the center and using its Soul Guard to continuously bombard the opponent with a bunch of ambushes and damage. So having the ability to bounce problematic cards really helps. The last one I want to talk about, at least on the Chaos side, is Chaos Bren Dimensional Sword. This is a really nice card. Being able to attack through the center is something that is really nice given the new playstyle. Having a monster in your center and just soul guarding it away, this helps. And not only that, but it's an activator. More on that, by the way, when I cover Oni Assassins in its own video. Those of you who I've talked to already know what I'm talking about. But I think this card pales in comparison to Hairpin Blade Hozuki, just because being able to draw off of every ambush is really powerful and not lets you draw into the spells that you need to be able to cast. I think overall, Chaos Brand Dimensional Sword is a really nice card, but Hairpin Blade Hozuki is just better. And speaking of which, let's move on to that, since this is part of the 5 World Build Masters cards. Hairpin Blade Hozuki. Being able to draw a card is very helpful, but this isn't just an Oni Assassin card. This is also a Skull Warrior card, because being able to draw off of just calling from the drop zone is just really nice and helps continue your engine. But this can also be a ninja card if you run Tsukikage SD still, because being able to call Byakuya SD from your drop zone and, well, drawing a card off of it continues the engine that you have and doesn't limit your hand size all that much. Being able to +2 off of that is really worth being able to pay 1 gauge and pay 1 life. And just like the Chaos Dimensional Sword, this can attack through monsters in the center, and has a 5k relevant power. So, overall I like Hozuki better, but I can understand if you want to go with Chaos Brand Dimensional Sword for Oni Assassin deck. Continuing on, Evil Ocular Arts Yamagitsune. Can I say that this is the Skull Warrior I really, really wish they had made from the very beginning? It isn't limited to just Skull Warriors. I can see use of this in water, for instance. Being able to grab a key size 0, or in Katana World, being able to grab a Tsukikage SD, or... Like, this has so many uses in so many different places that it's not limited to Skull Warriors. Though, obviously, Skull Warriors, this is great as well. I do remember one Skull Warrior player just commenting that, why does it have to pay call cost? And the answer is because they don't want it to be broken. When Skull Warriors are getting the tools that they're going to be getting in X2, I think it's best that it stays like this. Don't sleep on this card. It's good. On a similar vein, Apex of Flash Step Tsukikage is a really interesting card that I think can be splashed into more than just ninjas, because a lot of decks still run ninja arts. And being able to retrieve them, especially when they are, say, destroyed, or you mill them out and you really, really need a specific one, this really helps. And paying 1 gauge for it, for a 2 crit attacker as well, that's kind of nothing. I do appreciate what this does, and I think it serves best in a ninja deck, though obviously it can be run in any deck that heavily focuses on ninja art. I don't have a lot to say about Ancient World, not because the cards aren't interesting, but because they're very straightforward. Chaos Valvaros, for instance, is a very straightforward card. Pay 5 gauge, look at the top 5 cards to your deck, put it top and back in any order, draw a card, then you may call a monster by your hand, bring its call cost. What it makes it really interesting, of course, is that it's 5 gauge in a meta where you're not really playing Ruler of Chaos anymore, so playing it for free is really only through the back of the Gear God's Overkills. And, well, is that worth a slot here? Maybe, but it doesn't protect itself from destruction, and all it does is rearrange your cards. Is that worth it? Of course, your playstyle will vary. Burn Nova, you are an Omnilord that finally redirects attacks. I found it weird that Crimson Drum was the first one to be able to do that, and that it wasn't Burn Nova. So, hey, we're finally getting a Burn Nova that actually does what Raging Spirits does. Nothing really much to say about that otherwise, but hey, 9-8 triple attack is pretty nice for any world to have. Corrosion Prosthetic, or Prosthesis rather, is kind of an interesting card, and I think one that people are misreading a lot. When a card says that all monsters on your field cannot be put to other areas by your opponent's card effect, it doesn't protect against bounce. It doesn't protect against destruction either. All it does is prevent it from being moved from the center to the left, or from the left to the center. Matters for cards like Spark Gallows, who is a nice sideboard card that gets rid of formation-based decks and moves them off so that Thunder Empire can have an easier time clearing center. This prevents that. This obviously depends on how many people are running moving-based cards, but I think it's a nice sideboard tech against decks that you really just want a stalwart defense. Finally, Havoc in Dragonland. This is an interesting card for one specific reason. Seeger. Now, people remember Seeger from way, way back in the day, and I can't say he's great now, but it says to destroy a size 3 or less monster on the field. That includes your own. So, if you have a need for it, then you can kill off your own Seeger and force evolve it to the next form. For example, let's say that you were on Spartan and you move on to Tempest Enforcer. That way you can use your Rene Ryusho in mid-combat to change it into God Eclipse. Obviously, this is something quite for niche purposes. Most of the time you'll try to destroy your opponent's monsters. But this is a nice interaction that I don't think a lot of people have noticed, and because Seeger's kind of an outdated deck at this point. But hey, it's there as an option, and I do like that option. Being able to gain life or gain gauge equal to the size is just a nice effect. Finally, Invincible Bonds, Ricky, and the Raging Spirits. This is just great. I like the fact that this is Ancient World only monsters, and that it's not a dragon attribute. They really tried to Dragon Ein and Dragon's Y proof this, so that there would be no issues like there was with Star Dragon World. So, overall, this is a nice card. I expect to see it a lot, even if you're not playing Raging Spirits, because this is just a nice zero for all Ancient World decks to run. Next up is Dungeon World, and despite the fact that they didn't really get enough cards, in my opinion, in the set, I think they got a really key card for Demon Lords, and that's Demon Lord's Controller, Chaos Constructor. Being able to call a monster from your hand and make it a size 0 really alleviates a lot of the hand size problems that they were having. Before, the only real way to get rid of size 3s that you just couldn't call because they weren't size 0 was just gauging them away or discarding them to bonus quest. Now you have a third option, which is calling them through Demon Lord's Controller. And being able to call Demon Lord's Controller from bots kind of makes you have a full field off of just one ability. And you can also use this as your center monster to try and replace bots when he gets destroyed. This is a really nice card, and I do appreciate what it does to Demon Lords. And the second card I want to cover is Unfreezing. Unfreezing is basically a spell version of Chaos Daryl Burke. And that card was so ubiquitous that it was effectively treated as a spell even in non-Chaos decks. Well, guess what, Dungeon World? You got it too. Being able to look at the top 3 cards of your deck, choose one, and add it to your hand, not only gives you more information, but your opponent has no idea you grabbed, and all for the low cost of 1 life. This is a great card, and something that Dungeon World could use, even if it's not Demon Lords or Dungeon Enemies or Adventurers. Any type of Dungeon World deck can use this. It's a great card. Now it's time for Legend World. Oh boy. So Levitane got a few cards, not that many, but one in particular is definitely one that people have been talking about for a while. Eroded Beast Sword of the King, Levitane Savage. So, I think, and this is someone who's been playing with Levitane for a while, I think this is the new Levitane that you run 4 of. Being able to equip a hero item from the drop zone lets you be willy-nilly with gauging them and utilizing them. As long as you have a Durandal out and maybe a Zulfa card, then you're pretty much safe from most interruptions, and if you do need to stop Overturn Missouri, then you still have Minus' treasure. So, overall, I do like this Levitane a lot more, and its overkill lets you search specifically too. The drawback, obviously, is that you can only do this during the main phase as opposed to the original Levitanes during any time of your turn, so you could do that during attack phase. But what makes this super special is that it's at the beginning of your attack phase that you get a free item from your drop zone. So if you use the Impact to get another attack phase, you get another item as well. This obviously can chain itself. And, well, giving more options to a deck that didn't really have that many other than teching different swords makes it a lot more powerful. A nice reprint for Valkyrie All-Knowing Alwadal, and I think that's really it I need to mention for reprints. Elenid's Ring. This card's going to be annoying. So, while this only works when you are being attacked, it doesn't really protect your monsters. A discard shield in the world where they have the most discard effects? Oh boy, this is going to be a powerful card. Nullifying the attack, discarding a card to draw a card, and gaining a life is a powerful ability in Legend World. I do not see the reason why you don't play 4 of this. Even in Levitate. Unless you're playing Merlin, of course, in which case I guess you can't grab these. The last one I want to talk about is the Water Sarkar powerhouse, Chaos Mothman. This is an interesting card. Because, while you can't really play one copy, more than one copy without having some size issues, Chaos Mothman is such an interesting card for Water Sarkar. You have this powerful 8/3/2 that you can give double attack thanks to Tree of Dolahan and the Impact Self being able to restand them. It's just, you have so many powerful attacks, and this actually gives you some form of consistency and protection because it also has Soul Guard. And hey, being unable to be rested, that stops narcolepsy quite a bit. Overall, I do like what this gives Water Sarkar, and I think it needs like 1 or 2 more things to be really, really good. While the next world is Darkness Dragon World, that's not really what I want to talk about. It's the 100 demons in it, actually. 100 Max General Chaos Gokumen Gaio. Alright, so this card is really great for a couple of reasons. First off, it gives us another draw outlet. We don't have Jessica in English yet, so having access to this is really, really nice for draw. And if we need the life, hey, we have that as well. It pairs very well with Evil Deity Altar, and gives a card Soul. So, having Soul is a good thing, specifically for Apocalypse Riders, because being able to draw 2 off of just hacking a Soul helps provide 100 Demons with a lot of draw power, and this definitely helps. This is the reason that this card is specifically the reason why I'm exploring size 3, 100 Demons. Because, overall, I mean, this this is a definite upgrade from the trial deck Gokumen Gaio that we got. Finally, we come to the dual world cards and the no world cards, affectionately known as only Chaos. And yes, I'm skipping generic, and only because I don't think there's really much to say other than great sideboard text for Athra and Abigail, so let's just move on. And likewise, I'm skipping over to dual world cards because I do want to talk about a couple of the Chaos cards. Specifically, first off, Infinity Chaos. So I had a ruling question that I wasn't sure of when this card was first revealed, and the question was, does this count as part of your deck size when you build your deck? It's like, if you run this, do you get to run 49 cards? And the answer is no. It doesn't count as part of your deck. You just put it underneath your regular Chaos flag the moment that you start the game. It doesn't count as part of your deck, so you still have to run at least 50. With that out of the way, let's cover the most important card to the Mini Gear God lineup. I would argue that it's actually Mini Gear God Rainbow over Mini Gear God Black, but Mini Gear God Rainbow lets you just take advantage for using your Mini Gear God skills. But not just that, it's also whenever one of them just gets destroyed. It's not by effects, it's just whenever it's put from field into the drop zone. So even if you're not even using their effects, just having one of them die, you get to gauge one and draw a card. Of course, it's only once per turn, but still, that's a really nice ability to have. That said, Mini Gear God Black's not a slouch either. I mean, you still get Soul Guard, you get card destruction. It's not bad, it's just weird. Most of the rest of the support is kind of straightforward, though I do want to just make a small mention of Chaos Gear just because it's the new electrification. It gets better the more monsters you have on field. Yay! But it's a bit more flexible. I think even being able to just draw one, ditch one is completely, absolutely fine if you absolutely need to. But, hey, I mean, it's the draw card in a format with Obstruct. Yay. Going forward, we're going to have 2 more sets in the X release, appropriately titled X2, coming in April and May in Japan, and I'm not sure what time in the North America, but at some point in the future. And I just wanted to take a little bit of time here to cover what exactly this is going to mean going forward. It looks like Bushiroad is aiming to create sort of like a triangle effect when it comes to the format per se, where we have aggro decks like Thunder Empire um, losing to tank decks such as Athra, who lose to combo decks such as Plague and Requiem, who lose to aggro decks. And of course, it's not just as simple as that, but having some sort of continuum where all three are equally powerful can help bring this game back to an equilibrium of sorts. Of course, with the power creep that has happened over the past couple of sets, it's it's kind of debatable where this will end up. But overall, I think this is going to be a really interesting format going forward. Obviously, we just need to slog through this last little bit and start with the X2 sets to release some more interesting cards here and see what the forgotten attributes are kind of missing out on. All right, I think that's gonna cover it for now. There's not really much I can do all by myself, and with no one else to bounce off of. It's just going to be effectively my opinion in a lot of areas. But I do want to cover one thing. Next week, if it happens to be just me, it's just going to be me again, but hopefully we have more people around this time. Next week, we're going to cover, among other things, the main topic, the reason for Kidani's demotion, and supposedly what the official word is. And at this point, I don't have enough information to judge it, but I'm not buying it right now. What am I talking about? Come back next week and find out. This has been The Night Shadow, signing off.